Hello, everyone. Hi, this is Vinnie. I hope you can all hear me. We are using the chat room. Can you check the chat room very quickly? I'm going to say hello in the chat room for you to visualize me. I don't know if you can see me there in the chat room saying hello. Can you? Okay, I see some questions coming up. Okay, all right, guys. So I'm going to start. Thank you very much for being here. And before I forget, Happy Teachers Day. It's October the 15th. I can see that we have people from other countries as well. And I don't know when exactly you celebrate Teachers Day, but we're celebrating Teachers Day today here in Brazil. And I feel really honored. It's a real privilege to be talking to you a little bit about the evaluation and the selection of published material. Thank you very much, SBS, for the invitation. Before I begin, let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to organize things today. So I'm going to address the questions later on. So I'll tell you a little bit about my experience. I'll share some ideas with you. And then if you have questions, feel free to post the questions during the talk or after I'm done so that I can address them later on, okay? Also, I'm not going to make this presentation available. The recording will be made available, but not the PowerPoint. But you can find all the content from the presentation in this book. It's my book with Susan Holden, Teaching English Today, Context and Objectives. A lot of what I'm going to say is also in the book. So if you're interested in the topic and if you want to know more about other topics related to teaching, feel free to take a look at the book, and I hope you enjoy it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about evaluating and selecting published material, which is something that a lot of us have to do as teachers, especially, for example, if you're working as a private teacher. If you have private students, you need to select sometimes a course book, sometimes supplementary material, and you need to decide which material you're going to use with your students. And today I'm going to address a little bit some of the features related to the selection process and what we should take into consideration when selecting this material. The talk is also relevant to coordinators or course designers who work for a school or for a language center and sometimes have to make this decision whether to use this book or that book. Why am I talking about this specific topic? I'm a course book writer. I have written course books and I have made contributions to a number of other course books from a range of contexts, from Fundamental 1, Fundamental 2, Ensino Médio. I've also worked as a course designer in many contexts. So what I intend to do with you guys today is to share a little bit of my experience being in both sides there, right? So let's start a little bit by looking at what we know about the process of writing books today. Something that we sometimes forget is that course books are often written to cater for a wide range of profiles. So when we're writing a course book, we have to take into consideration a range of profiles. It can be a student in a small town, it can be a student in a big city. Depending on the course book, you will be writing to different nationalities. So there are a lot of things that are taken into consideration when writing a course book. This can enrich the material a lot because some very careful considerations have to be taken on board, but it can also present some limitations and some gaps maybe that are not necessarily relevant to your particular context. One of the most important things when we talk about selecting material and in implementing new course books and new resources is context. Your context is extremely important. So as a teacher, you should never try to look, as a teacher or a course designer, you should never try to look at the course book as the answer to your course. A book is not a methodology. A book is not something that should be followed blindly as a prescriptive method. And as I said, I'm a course book writer, and I'm telling you this. When we write books, we don't expect teachers to simply go from one exercise to another without adapting, without questioning, without changing things, so that the material there can become more relevant to their contexts. So we know that the teacher must adapt to the material to make it even more relevant, more meaningful, more effective within their given context. If you have a group of 5 students, for example, who are studying 15 hours a week, your context is already very different from another teacher who's got 45 students who are studying twice a week. If your students, they are more exposed to the English language because they travel a lot, or they have certain resources that allow them to be exposed to the English language on a regular basis, the kind of experience that they will have with the course book will definitely be different from the kind of experience that somebody or a group of students who don't really have access to this, the English language, this kind of exposure will need. So it is very, very important that when you decide to adopt a book, you also think about how you're going to adapt it. Adopting is not following something blindly. Adopting does mean adapting. Because at the end of the day, you as a teacher, you are the most responsible person for the whole process. So we need to remember that we teach the students and not the book. No book will be perfect for your context. No book is going to offer you all the answers and all the solutions based on the kind of students that you have. Nobody knows your students better than you do. The course book writer or the material developer will do their very best to try and cater for the most general needs. A lot is researched. A lot is read about the profile of students. It is not something that is done completely irresponsibly or recklessly. So the group or the student profile is designed, is identified, but we also know that no matter how much information we have access to, no matter how much research, how many surveys have been carried out, at the end of the day, your student in your classroom is unique. The group that you have will not be the same group that I have, and sometimes the 2 groups that you have in a similar context, in the same school maybe, will be extremely different. So using a book is naturally adapting this book to better cater for the students. We don't teach a book, we teach students, we teach people. The book is a tool, is a very powerful tool, and some books can work as an amazing springboard for language development, critical thinking, exciting discussions, relevant topics, 21st century skills. But if you as a teacher don't look at all this material critically and feel empowered to be a co-author in the process of using this book, you are not going to achieve your objectives as an educator. So rule number 1, never expect a book to solve your problems. Don't outsource this responsibility. The book is there to help you. So yes, you're going to look at different course books and you're going to find things that are perfect for your context, but in the same material, you're going to find things that are not exactly what you're looking for. This is part of life. If you think that a book is perfect for you, this is a bit awkward because the book was not really written for your students. It can be the most suitable material, but you will need to adapt, taking into consideration the students that you have right in front of you. We cannot forget this. So, since I'm talking a lot about the students, we need to remember that you're not the only user of the book. I've made this mistake myself. Sometimes I choose a book because I love it, because it's the kind of book that I want to use. It's the kind of book that I would like to use as a student. And I forget that maybe my students are not me. It's something that happens a lot. We get carried away. We love the visuals. We love the topics. We love the way that the language is explored and exploited, the kind of texts. But sometimes our students are very different. They're different people. They come from different backgrounds. They have different needs. And a book that is perfect for you, either as an individual or as a teacher, because it's a book that is very much aligned with what I believe in as a teacher. It really helps me as a teacher. It may not work so well with the students that you have. So when selecting a course book, remember, you will adopt a course book, you will adopt a material, and you will have to adapt it. The material should not be the answer to all of your problems. It is one of the many tools that you can take advantage of in the classroom. Rule number 2, think of how the students are going to use this material. Think about what they need, what they like, how they relate to the content, and then it will be easier for you to also adapt this material. So these are two, I think, important pieces of information there. So you have a range of books. What criteria do you use? Where do you start from? The first thing, as I mentioned, is for you to look at your context. So different contexts will demand different materials. I've seen a lot of people making, I wouldn't say mistakes, but making interesting decisions, trying to select a book that can be an amazing course book with rich content, very interesting language work, but that doesn't necessarily match the context that they are teaching in, either because there is too much information or too little content in the book, or so on and so forth. So when identifying your context, when mapping out what your context is, what are some of the things that you can take into consideration? First one, how many contact hours do you have with your students? Do you have 2 hours a week or 15 hours a week? Do you have an intensive course and your students are going to use that material for one entire month, or is it spread throughout the year? So this is one thing that you need to take into consideration. How many contact hours exactly do you have? The second point that you can take into consideration is the resources that you have available. Why is that important? Because in some contexts, the course book will be the only, not the only, it's never the only resource. The students are always there, and they are our resource number one. But other than the students, sometimes the course book might be the only extra external resource that you have. In that case, the kind of content that you'll find in the book, the kind of work that will come from the book is different from a context where you have many other resources. Let's imagine that you have access to the internet and you have a reader that has to be connected to the book, and you also have to use technology in the classroom. Depending on how many resources you have available, the type of book that you will need to be the backbone of your course will vary. Then we need to look at the students. As I said, I mean, they have to be the most important variable in this process. Who are my students? Who are they? How old are they? Are they all the same age? Or maybe I might have mixed abilities. If I use a book that is too adult-oriented with a group of teenagers, maybe they're not going to connect with this material. But if I have a very mixed group, teenagers and adults studying together, what kind of material will be relevant and interesting to all of them? What do they need exactly? And when I talk about students' needs, I always like to make this a very wide spectrum of needs. It can be linguistic needs, it can be affective needs, it can be professional needs, personal needs. What do my students need exactly? Do they need English just for specific purposes? Or do they need English to help them at school? Do they need to talk about current affairs? Do they need a good level of cultural awareness when they use their English, or do they need something a little bit more pragmatic and technical because of the kind of work that they will have to do with the English language. Then, as I said, sometimes we consider our expectations. We expect the book to do this, to be that, to have whatever, and we forget that students have their expectations too. So do they expect to have a workbook, for example, together with a course book? Oh, but I, as a teacher, I don't think it's necessary. Or the opposite, I think it's really important. Okay, but are you prepared to deal with students' expectations as well? Because maybe you have a good point, but can you sell this idea to students? Or are you going to have a rather unnecessary conflict that might demotivate students because you're trying to impose your expectations and your beliefs to students? So it's important to investigate, what do they expect? Do they expect to have access to the answers? Does this book offer an answer key that students can look at? Is this something that is important to my students? Do they expect to have access to the audio? And do I think that it's necessary and important? And if I don't agree with my students' expectations, can I explain it to them and convince them so that they don't start the process with some level of dissatisfaction or uneasiness? So I think that identifying students' expectations, what they think a material should be like, and what they should find in a material is extremely important in this process when selecting or better identifying your context. Mind you, this is all before we select the material. This is all before you even start looking at the material, because a habit that I see very often is for teachers to look at a new course book. So somebody comes to you and says, look at this course book, it's really interesting. And then you try to see if this course book is relevant to your context. When my point is that we should do the opposite. We should look at our context first. We should identify the needs of our students. And then we should go after materials that are aligned or more related to the profile, to the context that we identified. It's the opposite, really. It's first mapping out the needs and the context, and then looking for materials, and not saying, oh, there's a new book. Let me look at this book and see if I like it. Let me look at this new book and see if it's okay. Sometimes we fall prey to this, and I believe that it's not as productive as going the other way around. Then, after you look at the student's age, their needs, their expectations, you also need to consider their background. Where do they come from? What kind of educational and cultural background do my students have? And what kind of language background do they have? After you have completely identified the kind of students that you have, only then can you move on to see how your entire fit is organized, your entire timetable, syllabus fit. What does that mean? We don't teach, I mean, sometimes we do, but we don't usually teach a loose course, like, oh, it's this course here. We usually have a course that is integrated with another course, and that is going to take students to another course. So it's usually part of a macro design. When we think about course design, we need to have an objective for the entire course first. And then the levels, they have their own objectives and their own goals. And then lessons have their own objectives and their own goals. So when we look at the continuum, where my students are coming from and where I want them to get to, we can look at this particular course, basic 1, intermediate 2, upper intermediate, whatever, and see what kind of material I need, what kind of course book I need that will allow me to make a smooth transition from one level to another, from one block of levels to another. Then I need to look at my current material as well. Do you know why? Because as a course designer and academic coordinator and educational manager, I have made many mistakes with this. Not only once. Sometimes we like to believe that we Oh, guys, by the way, I can see that some questions are coming up. I will address the questions afterwards, okay? So feel free to pose the questions, and then I will look at them later. So as I was telling you, as a course designer, academic coordinator, I've made the same mistake a couple of times. Sorry. I got totally fascinated by how wonderful a book would be for a particular context, and disregarded the fact that the transition from the old material to the new material was not something that students would deal with so naturally and so smoothly. So students felt some kind of a shock in that transition. And that can be extremely stressful because students' affective filter can go really high, and then you have that wonderful piece of material that you cannot fully use, and students are questioning, but I liked the old one better because of this and that. So always think about how the new material, the new course book, for example, connects with your current material. Then, to identify your context still, you are going to consider your expected outcomes. What outcomes do you expect from this course? Is this a more content and language integrated kind of thing? Is this a more English for specific purposes kind of thing? Is it a skill course focusing on speaking or focusing on writing? So what are the goals that you want to achieve in terms of language gain? And what is your academic proposal? I mean, what exactly do you offer students as an academic proposition? What are the beliefs, the academic pedagogical beliefs that you have as a course designer or as a teacher that should be the structure of your course? All of this work should happen before we look at the books, not after. We first map out all of this. We first answer all of these questions. We first diagnose our situation. We devise the profile, a detailed profile of our students. We think about the entire continuum of levels, one after the other. And then, after we have identified our context in detail, then and only then can we start looking at the books. Then we look at the books and we cross the kind of material that we have there with the context that we have. What are the four main principles, in my opinion, that we need to take into consideration when analyzing a book? First of all, the beliefs. In the teacher's book, I know many people don't look at teacher's books. Let me tell you, we spend a lot of time writing teacher's books. So please, even if you're not going to follow the teacher's book, look at the teacher's book. There's usually a lot there that you can explore and exploit, even if you're not going to follow it blindly. One of the things that you're definitely going to find in a teacher's book is the author's beliefs. What do we believe in as an author? We believe that language has to be taught inductively. We believe that language has to be taught deductively. We believe in the use of meta-language. We believe that cultural awareness is integrated with the development of language skills. Do we believe that communicative competence encompasses linguistic competence as well? Do we believe that strategies are to be taught by the teacher and not naturally acquired by the students? Do we believe in the use of authentic material or not? Material should be graded. The authors, they will have certain beliefs about second language acquisition because there is no right or wrong. There are beliefs, things that from experience and from research, some people will say are better than other things, and some people will disagree with that. And this is the beauty of what we do. There is no clear answer. There are solid and well-structured beliefs that sometimes are a bit different. So when you look at a piece of material, you want to know if you and the authors of that piece of material share some beliefs. Maybe not all of the beliefs, but the key ones, the most important ones. And even more importantly, it's important that there's no belief that the authors have that gets into a huge conflict with your beliefs. Sometimes you don't necessarily believe in the same thing, but nothing there offends your beliefs. I don't know if that makes sense, but the idea is that you shouldn't be using a material that is based on beliefs that you absolutely disagree with, and that's possible. Then the academic objectives of the material and of your course. Remember, when we adopt a book, we are adapting the book. It's our responsibility. So no book should be used blindly. So the objective of the course book, it needs to match your objective as a teacher. And your objective as a teacher should not be the objectives of the book, because hopefully you will change that course book eventually, but your objectives might still be the same. And this way you can replace the book and not be dependent, because the idea is that as a critical designer of material, designer of courses, you can replace course books and you can replace materials to update, to improve, to enhance the student's experience, keeping your academic objectives, your view of learning, and your view of language. So how do you see learning? How do you understand learning? How do you understand the language? And then, of course, the more aware you are of your own beliefs and how you perceive these things, the easier it'll be for you to look at a book and say, this is the kind of book that is very much aligned with what I believe in. I'm not sure if this makes total sense, but if you have questions, please feel free to send me the questions and I'll address them later. Okay, so we map out our context, we identify our context and what's going on in our classroom and everything. We think about our entire course, about our objective as a teacher, and we look at a course book as a resource, one of the many resources that I have. And I consider my beliefs, the author and their beliefs, the objectives of my course and the objectives of the material, the way I understand learning, the way the material understands learning, the way I see language, the way the material sees language, and I consider whether there is a good match, whether it's a fit or not. So after I look at this overall thing, it's time for us to do some digging in. Let's get maybe 2 or 3 course books that we think are very much aligned with what I need as a teacher, and let's break it into pieces and look at everything. Here are some ideas, okay? This is by far not a limited list. Under no circumstance do I intend to say that this is all you have to consider, but these are some ideas. The first thing, when you're looking at the material, you want to consider the relevance of topics. How do you do this? Go unit by unit and take a look at the topics that the units present. Some books, for example, they like to develop a topic in depth. So they have a whole unit talking about the same topic. In some contexts, this is a great idea because students, they prefer to delve into a topic and fully explore it. In other contexts, maybe this is not so interesting because students get bored very easily and they want to talk about a range of topics one after the other. So how much attention is given to a topic is just as important as the relevance that they have. So is this something that is oriented to the profile of learner that I have? Maybe not, maybe it is, so on and so forth. The variety of types of texts, the genres of the text, that's also very important. So take a look at the course book and go for the reading sections. And remember, texts can be spoken or written. So go for the reading sections as well as for the listening sections. And take a look at the variety that you have there. Are all of the texts articles? Okay, maybe that's what your students need. In that context, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's not what they need, but the book has a lot of other qualities. So what do you need to know? That you will probably have to supplement the book with other genres of texts so that your students have the chance to read other materials and not just articles. Maybe they need to read as well a review, a book review, a film review, and an interview or whatever. So analyzing the variety of texts is something that is very important when selecting a book. If the book doesn't have a lot of variety of types of texts, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to bear in mind that if it doesn't match the needs of your context, you will have to supplement, adopt, and adapt. If the content is up to date, I'll give you some examples. I remember that once I chose a course book, and it talked quite thoroughly about a singer who had already died, but the book hadn't been updated. And we wanted to give students a project, but then, you know, all the content in that unit was there to present present perfect continuous, like he has been singing for I don't know how many years. So, I mean, of course, it's not something that would determine whether to use a book or not. But you need to know that the more up-to-date the book is, not only in terms of content and information, but also in terms of language beliefs, the more likely it is that the book will help you teach effectively. And it will be less adaptation. Because what do? You look at the students and you say, well, here is the present perfect continuous because he was alive. Now that he's dead, it should be the past. So let's pretend that he's alive. So you have to adapt. The more adaptations you need to do, the more the more difficult, let's say, the material becomes for you as an end user. You also want to consider the variety of activities that are suggested. Is it only multiple choice, only gap fill? We know that students, sometimes they get bored very easily. So the more varied the kinds of activities, the better. You also want to check and go straight for the explanations. For example, grammar. How is grammar presented? How is it explained? Is it something that will demand a lot of adaptation? Or is the book self-sufficient? You think that your students, by looking at the kind of explanation that the book offers, will develop autonomy and they will be able to understand what is there. You also want to think of context, the context of the grammar, let's say. Is the grammar contextualized? Is it grammar that is presented in a meaningful way? Or is it broken grammar, just the present perfect, for instance? Again, there's no right, there's no wrong. There is context. It depends on what you're looking for. But making an informed decision is vital for the effectiveness and the success of your course. Same question you want to pose regarding vocabulary. Do you think that the vocabulary needs to be contextualized? Are you happy with the kind of contextualization that the book offers for the vocabulary? What about the range of topic-based vocabulary that you have there? Is it wide enough for your context, for your needs? Does the course book offer any kind of extra suggestions, like, for example, websites or accompanying apps? Does the book bring intercultural content? And what is the perspective that the book offers when it comes to culture? Is it a biased perspective? Is there any preconceived idea that is underlying the book that maybe you don't want your students to be exposed to? When you write course books for the entire world, for instance, there are a lot of cultural factors that you need to take into consideration. There are things that you cannot mention, there are pictures that you cannot use, and sometimes these can be limitations that for your context are not an issue. And then maybe the book becomes very limited, culturally speaking. Maybe you want a book that has a wider range of cultural exposure. Again, it depends on context. What about your own environment? Does the book communicate well? The content of the book relates to your own environment? Is it something that is real to the students somehow? What about the audio material? Is the quality good enough? Do you have different kinds of speakers? Do you have a nice variety of voices and situations? How many components do you have? And here, guys, I'd like to say that sometimes we get so in awe with the number of components of the book, and then in practical terms, we don't use 10% of it in class. So it's, as you can see, it's, if you were to consider a rank there, I wouldn't say that this is a top 5 criteria that you have to use. Sometimes the book has, I don't know how many components, but you don't have time to fully explore them, then, you know, do you really need that extra thing? Sometimes a good book with varied texts, meaningful grammar presentations, a range of genres, very relevant topics, engaging activities that maybe doesn't have all the extra appendices, can be much more relevant to your context than something with a lot of add-ons. And the cost. This is also something that you need to take into consideration when choosing a course book. You cannot ignore that students will have to buy it. So, my suggestions for steps. First step, look and feel. You get the book. Let me see. Does it look professional? Well, this is my book with Susan Holden. I think it looks very professional, but it's not a course book, it's a methodology book. But what does it look like? How does it feel? How is the information displayed on the pages? The quality of the photographs. It's a quick exercise, literally flicking through the pages and getting an idea, assessing the look and the feel of the book. Then the syllabus. Go to the beginning of the book, look at the syllabus, look at the course content, and see how the 4 skills and the 4 systems are dealt with. Then there are many different kinds of types of syllabus design. It can be functional, it can be grammar oriented, it can be situational, it can be, maybe we don't need to know all of the terminology, but you do want to see how the book tackles listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and how the book presents the 4 systems, grammar, lexis, phonology, and discourse. So what are the beliefs of the author there? And how did the author choose to present these 4 skills and 4 systems? Then go to the teacher's guide, step number 3. Let me go to the teacher's guide and let me analyze what the author has to say about the way the book was built. Let me see if I agree with the author. Let me see if we share the same beliefs. Let me see the rationale behind the decisions that were made. And look at the underlying beliefs and the course proposal really critically. Then get a unit, a sample unit, and experience that unit. Do it. If you can, ideally, try to pilot that unit with a group of students, for example, or with one student if you're a private teacher who teaches individually. See how it goes. Because sometimes when you're looking at the unit, it's hard to imagine how much time you will spend on one page in one kind of activity. So what you can do is really perform the exercises with your students, ideally. If you can't, do it yourself. So how much time do you need to read the text? How much time? And what about the audio? And what about the sequencing of the exercise? And sometimes, as I said, you're not going to ditch a book, but you will be able to identify how much adaptations you will have to promote. Then the audios. Listen to the audio. Listen and do the exercises. What about the quality? What about the variety? And then look at the other resources and assess how relevant these resources are and if they really help the student's experience, or if maybe they look beautiful, but for your context, they are not that great. Because maybe an app for a cell phone can be amazing in some contexts where students are highly technological, where the school encourages students to bring their own device to class. And in your context, where things are a bit different, the app is not going to make much of a difference. So before we get super excited about what course books and resources in general can offer, we need to take into consideration our own context. Always start from the context. And then I'd like to suggest an interesting project that you can carry out with your students. It can be something based on PBL, project-based learning, and it can generate a lot of critical thinking and autonomy in students. You can devise a project where students will have to assess the strengths and the weaknesses of the course book that they are using. This can give you a lot of information. So you can maybe prepare a table, you can use some of the criteria that I mentioned, and you can ask students to work in groups and look at the course book they are currently using and say if they think the topics are varied enough, if the texts are interesting, if the information in the course book is relevant, if there are cultural references, if the explanations are clear, if the amount of time that is used in each unit is appropriate to their profile, and then they can discuss and explore the course book critically, understanding a little bit more the material that they are using, and providing you with a lot of information that will help you decide on what needs to be changed, what is going well from the student's perspective. Yeah, I think it's really important that we listen to what students have to say about the material, because sometimes they don't really participate in this process of selection. It's sometimes a very teacher-oriented kind of thing, but at the end of the day, they will be the biggest users of the material. So listening to what they have to say can really help us make better decisions, more informed decisions in the process of selecting, excuse me, of selecting course books and maybe adapting. So you've chosen a course book. Do you need to supplement it? I said that you will probably have to adapt it. Does it mean supplementing it? Probably. And why do we supplement? We supplement because the course book was not written thinking of your students. It was written thinking of a certain profile of learners that could come from different contexts. And as I said before, your context is known mostly by you. Nobody knows your context better than you do. So supplementing the course book with other resources and other material will be a very effective way to bridge the gaps between the course book and your students' reality, and compensate in areas that the course book can't get right. I mean, the author of the course book will not be a genius and will think of all the possible contexts in the world. So before we complain about a course book and we say, wow, this course book doesn't offer this, doesn't have that, let's understand that the course book was written for a wide range of contexts. Instead of complaining about it, why not consider how we can adapt it and how we can supplement it in a more pragmatic, less emotional way? Let's solve it, right? Just saying, oh, this course book doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, please change this, I hope you change that. The course book will not be written to you. It will be written to hundreds of thousands of people, because otherwise you should write your own course book, right? So how do you do this? You supplement the existing course book with materials and resources that will be more relevant, more meaningful to your particular context. One way we can do this is by using authentic material. Authentic material is extremely powerful. I don't know how long you guys have been teaching, but I've been teaching for 23 years. When I started teaching, if I wanted to use authentic material, I would have to beg somebody who was traveling abroad to steal a menu from a restaurant, for example. Or buy a magazine in a newsstand somewhere and pay a fortune for Time magazine, and then of course use that magazine throughout the year just to have access to authentic English. Nowadays we have the, excuse me guys, my nose. Nowadays we have access to a lot of things through the internet, so we can find authentic material that can be more relevant to advanced levels, to even elementary levels. We can find authentic materials as videos, as listenings, as readings, different topics, you name it. Is it time consuming? Extremely time consuming. Is it easy for us to select it? No, don't you underestimate how complex it can be. What do we want to design when we select an authentic material? First, we need to take into consideration the context and how we can explore that authentic material in our context. If it generates interaction or not, if it's a topic that is not going to generate much reaction, much interaction, then why supplement the course book with that? If it offers an opportunity for skills and strategies to be learned, so is it a simple exercise, or is it a text, or what kind of material can I devise on top of that authentic material? What educational goals can I have with that material? Is it something that goes beyond language itself, that can help my students develop 21st century skills, for example? Maybe something that my course book doesn't really cater for, but with some kind of authentic material can make the lessons more 21st century skills oriented. Does it look professional as well? Can it be integrated smoothly with the course, or does it feel like a hiccup? Like, oh, I have a course book and today a completely different lesson. Can I select this material, design a task so that it's integrated smoothly with the course book and my students feel that it's part of a logical sequence of events? And above all, especially today, is it a reliable source? Because honestly, we're a bit tired of fake news. So when I select a piece of material and I'm going to use it with my students and my students have trusted me as a teacher, I want to know if the source that I have selected is reliable. I'm not going to use anything that is fake, that can be challenged in my lessons, because above all, I'm an educator and not just an English teacher, as some people like to believe. So I want to check the source of my material. So in summary, this is Troika, it's my company. Follow Troika in the social media, find out what we're doing. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do as well. So in summary, you want to remember that when we adopt something, we adapt it naturally. No course book can totally guess your context unless you have written it yourself. Don't blame the material. Select the most appropriate one and then find ways to supplement it. Edit, leave something out, create something new, make it more complete and more meaningful by being a co-author of that book. And finally, I think my third point is, don't get super excited with something new and then try to fit it into your reality. Understand your reality thoroughly, analyze it, map out your context, and then look for the different course books and resources that you can use, instead of going from a fantastic resource and then thinking about ways to implement it or integrate it into your course. I guess that's it. Let me see the questions that we have. Do you think a graduation course should use a conversation course book or adapt to the subject content? That's a very difficult question because, as I said, there are a lot of criteria that we need to take into consideration, like how many contact hours, what are the expected outcomes of the course. In a graduation course, having a conversation course book can be very interesting depending on what you expect students to achieve. It depends a lot of the kind of degree that they have. So it's a possibility, but it's a bit hard to answer this question straight away. Would you consider adopting different course books, like one for basic level, another for intermediate level, and another for the advanced one, or the same book for all levels? Excellent question, Vitor. I think that there are pros and cons, and it depends on your context. Personally, I think that using the same series throughout, basic, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced, the same course book can be it can be very logical because it will be very logically sequenced, but it can be a bit boring. And also, if you think about what I said in terms of identifying the context, chances are your intermediate student will probably have needs that might not be the same needs that that particular book is catering for. So maybe this book from a specific series is perfect for your basic students, but when they reach an upper intermediate level, they have changed, the profile is different, and then this book is no longer the best idea. So as I said, there are pros, there are cons for you to use the same series of books throughout the levels. In my experience, I would definitely advocate for variety, because I think variety is the spice of life. So Laurencio asked why he was muted. I have no idea, Laurencio. I really don't know. Liliane is asking where I work. We were told to choose materials that will be aligned with BNCC. Okay, here we go, BNCC. What is your opinion about that? For those of you who are not from Brazil, the BNCC, they are like the national parameters. It's a basic syllabus. that the government have established as syllabus, as the parameters, the content that schools should follow. Liliane, I think it depends a lot on your context. Sorry, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. If your context really needs to abide by the national parameters, then it's important for you to find books that are aligned with the BNCC. If your context doesn't really need it, then the question is, why is it important to be aligned with the national parameters? Maybe there is a rationale behind it, maybe there is a reason, and investigating the why and wherefore can be much more liberating. It can really help you select course books and materials more freely and autonomously. But the parameters, the BNCC, they exist for a reason, but they consider one context, right? They consider the regular schools in a certain, so the whole question is your context the same context that the BNCC is catering for? I think that this is the question that you want to pose. Evelyn is asking, when adopting a new book, should I change the series in all grades or should change first the lower levels? This is an interesting strategy. If you're going to change course books, if you gradually change it by starting with the entrance levels, level 1, and then you change the course book there, and you let people actually finish the book that they are already using. In my experience, this usually works best, because as human beings, we grow attached, very much attached to the material that we're using as students. So a smooth transition is a very important strategy. And Maud is asking me, what do I do about the interchange book? What do I think? Maybe what do I think about the interchange books for private classes? Maud, as I said, it depends a lot on the context. It depends a lot on your students and your expected outcomes and what kind of teacher you are, the beliefs that you have. If it's a piece of material that you feel is aligned with your beliefs, that you feel that is up to date, that caters for the profile of learners that you have, that doesn't need so much adaptation, then I think it's a great tool. However, it's important to be constantly checking and reassessing the relevance of a piece of material with the profile of your students. It's a continuous exercise. A couple of housekeeping moments here, guys. Priscilla is reminding me that this will be available as of next week, the recording. And if you want a certificate, you will receive it tomorrow, okay? There will be a certificate of participation to all the attendees tomorrow morning. Also, I'd like to, if you're interested in this topic, I'd like to invite you to take a course that we are offering here in São Paulo. It's called Education Design. It's going to be me and Luis Otávio Barros, who's also a course book writer, experienced course designer, and we will be offering this course on the 26th and the 27th of October, 2 days talking about design of tasks, design of courses. So if you're interested in this topic, take a look at Troika's website and find out if you can join us. I would love to see you there and continue this conversation. And also, we also have a course, if you are a teacher trainer, or if you want to get involved with teacher training, we have a course in January, which is also on our website. It's a 5-day immersion for teacher trainers to develop their skills. If you want to get into the profession, for you to start getting into the profession. Maura, the name of the book I mentioned, I think it's my book with Susan Holden. It's called Teaching English Today. Aha, marketing moment. Chapter 16 in this book talks about selection of materials. A lot of the things that I mentioned here you can find in Teaching English Today contexts and objectives. Guys, thank you. So wonderful book. Thank you, Erika. Hi, Erika Yamashita. How are you? Guys, I don't know who's on. So we have 1 minute. If you can just tell me where you are from, I would, oh yes, the book is available on sbs.com.br. Eric, I love you too. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you so much. We have Vitor from Marília. We have Ruth from Peru. This is lovely. Hi, Peru. I love Peru. Lilian from Escola Mobile, Uberlândia. Guys, this is so amazing. Thank you so much. Your question, Evelyn, I'm sorry. Santarém, this is fabulous. Oh, Evelyn, parents usually address me to ask about what English I'm teaching. I always tell them international English, not American or British. It's a wonderful answer. The kind of understanding that parents need to have about the kind of English we teach is that we teach our students to live in the world. And in the world today, they won't speak only to Americans, only to British people. They will speak to a wide range of nationalities, and this is what we need to be prepared for. So there you go, Evelyn, the answer to your question. We have São Paulo, Limeira. Guys, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the talk, please drop me a line. Follow me in social media. I would love to have your feedback. If you didn't like it very much, you can also write to me. It's always good for us to know how we can improve. So please just try not to be too cruel, but constructive feedback is always welcome. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope I can see you all around, and maybe now in October or in January. SBS, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Maria Luisa Nobre, we are family. There is a Nobre there. Thank you. Sorry, guys, I'm getting silly because it's time for us to finish. So I'm relaxed. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you very much. Have a lovely, lovely week, and happy Teacher's Day. Bye.